Silly solution.
We're in the library.
Sorry.
All right, hey everybody, this is Graham.
This is Ashkahn.
And today's question is, what social networks do you recommend using? Which I'm just going to guess it means for a float center, not like personally, you know.
Yeah, okay. So, before the specifics, I guess the general answer. I have a general answer for this.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like anyone that you're actually going to keep up with.
That's a good answer.
I mean, that's the real, like, this, whether you're using Facebook, Twitter, all this other stuff, like, none of that actually matters unless you're actually doing it. Like, pretty much any social media account that you have that you don't actively engage with, I think kind of looks worse for your business than better. Like, if you have a Facebook page and you don't do anything with it and you don't post that often, you don't have any pictures, like, it kind of just feels weird when people get there, you know? They look and your last post was like a month and a half ago and they're like, are these people still in business? Like, what's going on with this place?
Yeah, it's like having a website with a Hello World page as your homepage, you know? You're just kind of like, is this real? And the same advice for a blog, right? That's why we kind of advise people not to do a blog, especially first things, is because it seems like something you can keep up with. And the reality is like 99% of anyone who starts a blog can't actually do a regular post. So it ends up being sort of this deserted wasteland if you start something and can't actually keep up with it. So
that would be my first criteria. Like, are you actually going to be actively updating and keeping up with whatever you're starting? And after that, I'd say, like, ideally, like, any social media thing that you also use yourself personally is a plus, because then you know how it works. You kind of know the community. You know, you're just a little bit more like up to speed with what's going on that platform. If you use it personally and you're familiar with it and you like it, then if you're just trying to like have a business presence on something you never use yourself. So that's like helpful.
Especially if you're going to be managing it yourself, you know,
Yeah.
So I guess more for smaller centers and things like that. Obviously being familiar with these things is a huge boon. If you're running like a 6-7 tank center, like, and you don't personally use Facebook, maybe hiring someone to do it for you is a good idea. And that's, you know, I like all of that said, Facebook is totally the one that you should do if you don't do anything else. The amount of, I mean, again, just looking at the industry reports that come in every year, it's always word of mouth marketing is number one way that people get new customers in their business. And number two is Facebook. And then there's everything down below that, right? So, you know, if you are investing time into one social network, the stats kind of say Facebook is where most of the action is at.
Which makes sense. You know, it has some kind of local filtering that you can do with it and things like that, right? Like, there's certain, like, I don't think Pinterest necessarily is going to be the right fit, or certain things just don't exactly have the same structure if I'm a local business in a city trying to communicate and reach the people around me.
Yeah, I think Twitter has not been as useful. I'd almost put that at the lower end of some of the, like the big three at least. I think it kind of goes Facebook, sort of way above everything else. And then, but, you know, down, like next in line, which is a fair ways down, I'd put Instagram. And I think that's because float tank centers just make interesting places to photograph. You know, like as far as a picture-based social media, float tank centers don't have the worst situation going on. We're kind of visually interesting. Mm-hmm. And then Twitter, like you were kind of saying, it's not as, I feel like it does better with things that are more national or almost more current event oriented.
Right,
or
like a short idea that can just spread quickly or something.
Yeah, less like geographically centered, rooted in space, brick and mortar business. And then Snapchat, I know some float centers are using that, but I don't know of huge traction that's been gained with it, or people who are throwing thousands of dollars into Snapchat marketing every month or anything like that.
Yeah, really, like, as obvious as it sounds, Facebook really is kind of the big boy here. I mean, they have a very well developed at this point kind of advertising platform that allows for like pretty serious specificity in terms of who you're trying to reach and maximizing the ad dollars you're spending. And it's got the most just kind of hard confirmation from the industry. Like, there's a lot of float centers out there putting money into Facebook advertising, and a lot of people saying that it works and that they are getting their bang for their buck out of it.
Yeah, so in that sense, even outside of social media, investing time and energy into building a Facebook audience and running Facebook ads is worthwhile over things like spending money trying to do print ads or radio or anything like that. I mean, and I'm going to go back on what we said a little bit early on and say actually that, even if you're not active on social media yourself or think that you'd have trouble maintaining it, it's probably still worth having a good Facebook page for your center, even if that does mean, pulling on one of your staff to run it or getting someone whose job it is to just make sure you have one post going out a week. On the minimum side, something like that is probably still worthwhile. There's so many people who will interact with your business on Facebook, even if there's just not, or even if there's only a small amount of content coming out, but it's still regular, and that shouldn't cost you too much money or be too much of a hassle to maintain, and it's probably just worth it.
Yeah, and there's so many. I mean, if you don't know what you're doing or you're not on these things, like, again, you probably don't want to be, you're not the best qualified person to be managing them. So realizing that and finding someone who does meet those criteria is probably what you want.
Yeah. And that said, fortunately for social media, a lot of the good content that comes out is just stuff out of your float tank center. It's not like you have to know what memes are popular right now or any of their crazy algorithms for whether video or images are trending. I mean, those things are helpful, but the more you're just kind of giving a real world behind the scenes look into what it's like running this interesting, salty business that we're in, that's kind of the point of social media, is you get to have this social aspect and actually show the real world lifestyle of running a float center. And I think our audiences really connect with that. I usually give the example of our walls, for example, are so crazy with their soundproofing, and you never get to peek inside of them from the customer perspective. So there is a lot internally that you get to share that people might not even be aware of, for what went into building the float center, what goes into day-to-day running it, how much, visually, how much salt goes into your tank. These are all things you can generate pretty easily, even without too much expertise, that go a long way towards driving an audience.
Yeah, it really helps just kind of genuinely actually giving people insight onto what you're doing tends to be the best strategy, rather than just posting kind of inspirational quotes on top of pictures or more generic stuff like that. Like, it's especially cool starting up. I mean, that the process of building a float center is so interesting.
Yeah.
And you get to show people hey, just look, our crazy studs went in, and hey, look, this happened, and our first salt arrived, and look how giant a pile it is, and all that stuff is just kind of perfect social media content. It's interesting. It's relatable. It's kind of pulling off the wall between you and your customers, and that's in my mind really the stuff that you should be shooting for.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's it.
Yeah.
Definitely worth it to do Facebook. Everything after that, if you're not going to maintain it, think really hard about whether you want to start it in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you guys have other questions, you can hop over to floattanksolutions.com/podcast.
Shoot them our way, and we might even answer them tomorrow.
Probably not tomorrow, but within the next few days.
Not tomorrow in our time, but tomorrow in their time.
Oh yeah, maybe that could maybe happen. All right, we'll talk to you tomorrow.